A nation can be shaken without a single shot fired. No marching army, no roaring speech, just footsteps, millions of them. Between 1910 and 1970, more than 6 million African Americans packed bags, boarded trains, and slipped out of the South. Not loudly, strategically. And that quiet movement cracked one of the harshest systems of racial control in modern history. This was not just travel. This was power in motion. And today, on EraFusion History, you're stepping into the real story most textbooks barely whisper. Life in the early 20th century South was tightly controlled by segregation laws and customs designed to limit freedom. Jobs were restricted, schools were unequal, hospitals separated patients by race, voting rights were suppressed through literacy tests and intimidation. Violence was a constant threat. Historians estimate that thousands of racial terror killings occurred between the late 19th century and mid-20th century. That reality shaped daily life. Families lived knowing opportunity was capped and danger was close. Leaving wasn't simply ambition, it was survival logic. When a system blocks your path, movement becomes strategy. The first phase of the Great Migration began around 1916. It did not begin with a government program or national announcement. It began with whispers, letters from relatives, church testimonies, travellers returning home dressed sharp, speaking differently, carrying stories of wages that sounded unreal. Northern factories were desperate for workers as industrial demand surged during global war years. Recruiters travelled south offering train fare and jobs. Hope spread faster than any newspaper headline. One family left, then another. Soon, entire communities were planning exits. By 1940, about 1.6 million African Americans had left the South. Then came the second wave. Between 1940 and 1970, another 5 million moved. That means more than half of the total migration happened in just 30 years. Cities that had once seen only small black populations suddenly saw dramatic growth. Urban demographics shifted, political influence shifted, cultural influence exploded. Historians consider this one of the largest internal population movements ever recorded inside a single country. Not forced relocation, chosen relocation. That difference matters. Most migrants travel by rail. Train routes determined destinations. People often followed lines that connected their home states directly to specific northern or western cities. Many headed to Chicago, drawn by factory jobs and stockyard work. Others went to New York City for port, service and industrial work. Some traveled west to Los Angeles, where wartime industries needed labor. Rail companies sometimes offered free or discounted fares for workers willing to relocate. That turned railroads into arteries of change. Steel tracks became escape routes. Local authorities saw what was happening and feared losing their labor force. Some towns arrested people at stations on vague charges. Others pressured employers not to hire recruiters. There were attempts to block ticket sales. But once momentum began, it could not be stopped. When people taste the possibility of freedom, resistance only strengthens resolve. This is the quiet genius of the migration. It was protest without protest signs. Instead of confronting oppression directly, millions removed themselves from it. Systems built on cheap labor began to weaken when that labor walked away. the migration reshaped the American economy. Southern agricultural regions lost workers. Northern industrial regions gained them. Factory owners who once ignored black workers suddenly competed to hire them. Wages in the South had often been drastically lower than in northern cities. Even entry-level jobs up north could double a worker's income. That shift created leverage. Workers could change jobs, move again, negotiate pay. Economic mobility may sound ordinary now, but at the time it was revolutionary. When people can move freely, they gain bargaining power, and power changes everything. Urban neighborhoods expanded rapidly as migrants arrived. Churches became community anchors. Small businesses appeared. Restaurants, newspapers, and cultural centers flourished. Entire districts formed that reshaped city identities. Music evolved. Language blended. Fashion changed. Food culture expanded. Modern American culture owes a massive portion of its sound and style to this movement. Jazz, blues, gospel, and later rhythm-based genres grew stronger because artists carried southern traditions into northern cities where new audiences waited. Migration turned culture into a fusion engine. One respected job many migrants pursued was working as railway porters. These men travelled across regions assisting passengers. The pay was modest, but the exposure was priceless. Porters saw different cities, wages and lifestyles. They carried information back to communities through conversation networks. In an era before social media, they were living news channels. Information is power, and in this case, information-fueled movement. The more people heard about opportunities, the more they planned their own journeys. Among the millions who moved was a determined mother who left the South with her children seeking a safer future out west. She faced hostility even after arriving. Neighbors threatened her family, but she refused to return. Her children grew up in integrated schools. One of them became Jackie Robinson, the man who broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball. Her decision to migrate didn't just improve her family's life, it reshaped sports history. That is the multiplier effect of migration. One decision can echo across generations. The North and West were not free from racism. Housing discrimination existed, and job ceilings still appeared. Some neighborhoods became overcrowded because migrants were restricted to certain areas. Tensions sometimes erupted into violence. But there was one crucial difference. Options existed. People could search for better work, change neighborhoods, and build networks. Choice creates momentum, and momentum creates progress. Even when conditions were tough, they were often still better than what migrants had left behind. As millions relocated, voting patterns shifted. Northern states with larger black populations began electing representatives who paid attention to their concerns. That gradually influenced national policies. Laws changed. Court decisions changed. Public debates changed. Migration turned demographic presence into political leverage. Movements often need numbers to gain attention. The Great Migration created those numbers. Here is the deeper insight historians highlight today. The Great Migration functioned like a long-term strategy, even though no single leader planned it. Each family made its own decision, but together those decisions formed a collective force. By leaving regions that relied on their labor, migrants weakened systems that depended on controlling them. It was decentralized resistance, quiet, patient, effective. Not every revolution shouts. Some simply relocate. This story is not locked in the past. It offers lessons that still apply, you know? Access to information can change lives. Mobility increases independence. Economic opportunity reshapes social power. Community networks amplify success. And, perhaps most important, movement itself can be a form of resistance. When people refuse to remain where they are suppressed, they shift the balance of power. History shows that change does not always begin with confrontation. Sometimes it begins with departure. The Great Migration reshaped the United States in ways still visible today. It influenced city populations, cultural trends, labor markets, and political alignments. It helped lay groundwork for later civil rights victories by concentrating communities in regions where they could organize and vote more effectively. It altered how the nation saw itself. Without this migration, modern American society would look dramatically different. The music might sound different. The cities might feel different. The political landscape might function differently. Few movements have touched as many parts of national life. Let's talk real for a moment. These migrants were not celebrities. They were workers, farmers, parents, children, ordinary people with extraordinary courage. They planned routes, saved money, shared information, protected each other. That is survival intelligence at its finest. No spotlight, no applause, just strategy and grit. They didn't wait for permission. They moved, and movement became their weapon. The Great Migration proves something powerful. Systems built on inequality can look permanent. They can appear unbreakable. But when millions of people act in their own interest at the same time, even the strongest walls begin to crack. This migration was not just a relocation. It was a transformation of a nation's structure, culture, and future. And that is why its story still matters. If this deep dive opened your mind and gave you fresh perspective, subscribe to EraFusion History. Share this with someone who loves powerful untold stories, and stay tuned. Because here, history doesn't sit still. It moves.